new version of Meet Your New Neighbors. It's a new version because, as you know, we are all here for life in this place where we live until the pandemic leaves.
This is what we call a remote reception, right?
That's right. We usually have a room full of people, and afterwards we have a piano, kind of like a piano bar.
More of a party, right?
Yeah, it's more of a. Well, we can't do that now. So what we're going to do is, as new people come in, and this is our first new group. They're the ones baptizing this, and we have a time to just say hello, hear a little bit about them, and then, as you know, they're all wearing on their tags, or they will be soon, a little sign underneath that says newcomer. So after you've heard them here, if you see them with a newcomer, go up and introduce yourselves so that they can come to know you. So this is what it's going to be like for a few months anyway, until we can get back to the big.
Offered me a job as a geology professor.
Okay.
And having had 3 college degrees and no other job offers, I was smart enough to take it.
And your area of specialization was sedimentary rock.
Right.
And tell us something about that.
Limestone. That wall out there is made out of limestone.
Yes.
They use limestone to make cement,
Cement.
to make concrete. In the old days, in the classrooms, the blackboards are made out of slate.
Right.
That's a metamorphic rock. And they would write on the slate with a piece of chalk. Chalk is a sedimentary rock.
Okay.
Special variety of limestone. Also among sedimentary rocks includes coal, iron ore, lead ore. You couldn't build concrete roads without
Earl, tell me.
sand, limestone, and gravel.
Now, Earl, tell me, have you seen the trains go by here with just 50 to 60 trains a day with the limestone, and they're probably going to a cement plant to be
Texas
ground into cement.
Texas is run out of gravel.
Really?
What do you need to make concrete? You need sand, gravel, cement, and water.
Tell us also, you said in summers you worked at the Rock Island Railroad.
Back in the days when the railroad still used steam locomotives.
Okay.
And when I left there, I told the boss, I said, I'm going back to college to finish my degree. He said, stay on, McBride. I can give you a fabulous job as a mechanic on a steam locomotive.
Boy, that's an offer it's hard to refuse.
I was wise enough to refuse that in 1945.
Okay.
Anyway, so here I am, 47 years at UT.
All right.
We had 2 railroad yards in my town. The north-south was the one that went from Montreal to New York City.
An employee of the Census Bureau, but I was a supervisor of field workers.
All
I
right.
was working in the field.
Yeah. And where did you live? You lived in Houston, right?
Yes.
And you came here from Houston?
Yes.
Uh-huh. All right, and she's a Methodist, and I'm a Methodist, and she knows everybody who's Methodist in Houston. We've just been going through from the bishop down to her local church. She's been really active in the church. And so we're glad to have you come join here and be with us. Have you moved in? Do you have family here?
Yes, I have a son and his wife, and their 2 children, and then their 2 children. So I have 4 grandchildren here.
4 grandchildren.
And I have a daughter who lives here about 8 miles away.
Fabulous. So you've got family all around you.
Yeah.
Well, that's
One
great.
son left in Houston, missing.
Okay,
Greatly missing.
all right. Well.
Oh, nice. You don't, if I run into another Barbara, they're probably my age. Nobody names their
You
child
know,
Barbara anymore.
I've heard that comment before. They said that names are generational.
Right, right.
And Barbara was a popular one in that, in our generation.
And my mother named me for the very young and beautiful Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, that was very nice. Tell us about consulting for international law firms. Did anybody ever think in terms of international law firms?
No, especially not me. Well, it was an adventure. I retired about a year ago, and I mainly used American Airlines because it was so much international work. And I retired with 400 million miles
Hey.
on American Airlines. 400 million. Yeah.
400 million.
Yeah. So that was way too much, and which is why I just finally said, "Is it retirement yet?" and it was real close. So I locked them down. The interesting thing was lawyers, they're good at what they do, and then you get them out of that, and they're just newbies at whatever is put in front of them.
Yeah.
And so it was, they didn't want to come to my class because they didn't like not being completely successful.
Or in charge.
Or in charge, or do it, heaven forbid, in front of other lawyers.
Yeah.
And so,
Where they might be judged.
exactly. But I made them happy that they came. And then I said, bye.
Very good. And tell us how you got here from,
Austin.
were you started in Austin, did you?
Well, I was raised in Houston, but then when I married, we came to Austin. Then for my husband's work, we went to Dallas for a year. But then I've been in Austin for, 42 years.
We won't pinpoint it.
That's okay. 42 years. My daughter is 44, so I figure it that way. But it's definitely home. I didn't go to the University of Texas. I went to Trinity University in San Antonio.
All right.
Oh, that's
Good
very
school.
good.
And so when I came to Austin, everybody was talking UT language,
Yeah.
and it took me a while for me to, I'd whisper to somebody, "What's the drag?" And and if you don't know,
It's interesting. I use the term drag with other college towns. Roger mentioned that my family has a spaghetti factory up
Right.
in Burlington, Vermont. And I always say, well, they had a restaurant on the drag up in Burlington.
Yeah.
Because it's the University of Vermont.
right. I guess all big universities have a
Yeah,
drag.
a drag, yes. Well, Barbara, it's good meeting you, and
Thank you, Vincent.
welcome aboard.
Likewise. Thank you.
And
Right, yeah, well, welcome.
Thank you.
And you are the one who studied in the Sorbonne.
I did.
I got my tables
Yes,
mixed
mixed
up.
Yes, true, yes.
And you studied, you all know the Sorbonne and the University of Paris.
Yeah.
And you took your course in French.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
it was for strangers, but it was all French.
Right.
And
Papa
we
Red.
started out, the first course was basically the equivalent of studying Beowulf in French, which was not good at all. But I was there, and also the University of London.
Yes, what did you study in London?
Basically just history.
History?
Yeah, our family was living there, and so,
Yeah. Did you have a period that you?
No, just based, European history.
European history.
Yeah, right.
Well, then you've had quite an experience.
So anyhow, but, yeah, I have, you were talking about places where people were from.
Yes.
And basically, I'm from all over. I have lived, not visited, but lived in 13 states. And I have lived in London, in Paris, in Guam, and Okinawa. And so I never lived any place longer than 35 months. It was London and Paris, and then Pensacola, Florida for 35 months. And then we came here.
and been here since '75. So it was quite a change for me, from moving all the time to staying put.
Right.
You can accumulate a lot of junk when you stay put.
And what did your husband do?
My husband was a Corps naval officer, and when he retired from that, his MBA was in financial management, so he came to a national brokerage firm here in Austin, and was
Okay.
with them for 35 years. He was in the Navy 23 years, and he was with a national firm here for 35 years.
Well, you've had quite a career then, quite a
I
life.
love the traveling. My husband comes from northern New York, up near the Canadian border.
What's the name of the town?
Loudville. You will never have heard of it. It's near Watertown. It's an hour and a half north of Syracuse.
We both know it.
We come
We're
from
from
there.
New York.
Oh, really? Yeah,
We know it.
he's an hour and a half north of Syracuse, and they've had a large dairy farm there. It's now 160 years that it's been in the family.
It's been in the family.
So I traveled all my life, and he was used to staying put.
Let me tell you about Pensacola.
Okay.
Well, you were in Pensacola. Now that's a destination with Pensacola Beach, Destin,
Beautiful white beaches.
Yeah.
white
Beautiful white
beaches.
beaches.
Gorgeous white
They,
beaches.
when we were there, they were desolate, weren't they?
Yeah, well,
There was no
I know.
development there or anything.
No, well, when I was there, there's a radio station there, so, yeah. But anyway, yeah, but please say hi to Barbara for me.
We used to go to Pensacola Beach every night, and we'd stay there until it was dark because we didn't have air conditioning in our house.
True. And it's humid too.
And it's humid, yes.
Okay.
Right, so you have family here in Austin?
Yes, I have 2 daughter-in-laws, a son, a daughter, and 2 grandchildren that are here.
All right,
So,
well,
yeah.
welcome, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
appreciate it.
Now, Lexa Crane is
Discussing, and that your children went to Davidson.
Yes,
one of them.
one of them, the other went to Cornell.
Oh.
Oh,
Really?
My husband
school.
went to Cornell.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm from upstate New York, so I can appreciate Cornell.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
okay.
used to interview students there
Right.
for
Okay.
IBM.
Barbara
Oh, of course,
Davis
yes.
Waters.
Tell us about the construction business, John. You were
It's a
in
construction.
international construction, and you said heavy industry mainly, right?
Being civil.
Well, I started off in the Navy.
Okay.
As a civil engineer corps officer.
Yes.
I was on Ascension Island in the South Atlantic Ocean for about 3 years. They were shooting ICBMs at us to see if they could hit us.
Really?
Tracking, to see what the Minuteman missiles was.
Wow.
And then I went to work for Brown and Root for almost 20 years. And that got me a lot of places. I went to Iran and Dominican Republic and several shorter trips to places like Australia and Nicaragua and a little bit of time in Canada. And bidding jobs all over the place.
Uh-huh.
And then I left Brown and Root and became a consultant, which sounded better than unemployed construction worker. And spent some time in England,
Where?
Great Yarmouth,
Oh, yeah,
and
by the sea.
made most of the rest of the stuff. I went to Alaska for some work, and
Susie, tell us about your experience in Haiti. That was an interesting one also.
Yeah.
Yes, we were asked to go to Haiti. John was asked to go to oversee the construction of a nursing school by the Episcopal and Presbyterian churches.
Really?
There's a hospital down there that's run by both. And they wanted to build a nursing school, and they needed somebody who was foolish enough to go down to overseas, and they knew that our Sunday school teacher knew that we had been overseas before, and so he said, I thought of you all right away. And we went down there to build the nursing school, and we're there a year, and then left, and then the hospital closed, and we were asked to go back about 2 years later to reopen a guest house. While John was building the nursing school, I was running a visitors program for the hospital. It brought down doctors and people who work in the infrastructure of the hospital. And so we came home, and then about 2 years later, they asked us to go back and reopen the guest house with the idea of being able to earn enough money to reopen the hospital. And so we went back and were there about 9 months and got everything organized and was working fine, and then the earthquake happened. And we
You were there
in
during the earthquake.
We were there. And it's strange, I had never been in an earthquake or heard an earthquake, but when we heard the train, and then I realized that there are no trains in Haiti. And so then we knew it must be an earthquake.
And does the earth actually, I mean, shakes up?
Oh, yes, the earth was doing this. We were only about 5 miles from the epicenter. And I was working with a couple of our translators. I was able to get out of the house. And the floor above us collapsed. John was in the back of the house and he headed toward the front, and he was caught between the lintel over the door that I got out of and the floor of the building of the apartment above us, and was caught in that little trap for about 4 hours.
Oh my God.
And but we could holler back and forth after the noise stopped. So we knew that he was alive, and he knew that I was fine. And
Wow.
but it was exciting.
Yeah. Right. Vince.
Jerry, you were from Fort Worth originally, weren't you?
Correct.
And that's where you had your construction business, right?
Right.
I was talking with them before. They're my immediate neighbors, incidentally. We are about an apartment apart, and he was telling me about the experience. He'd worked in every area of Fort Worth, so that he was part of the building process, right?
That's correct.
Tell us something about the industry. Let me, as an introduction, let me say this. I can remember at IBM, we were constantly on the move and always had construction. I remember one construction supervisor, owner, contractor came to me. He says, let me tell you about the construction industry. And that is, when a client comes to me, they come to me with a problem, and then the problem is mine. So now you tell me about the problem.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it. You just keep rolling on. I have nothing against those, what you're telling me.
Is that how you would have interpreted it as well?
Yeah. Well, we've been in the business 70 some odd years. Started back in the 50s, and now when I got out of UT, I was way back in the construction business. It was a family owned.
Family owned.
Yeah, business, and
It's still a going business?
well, it's slowing down to a real stop. I think we're closing our Houston office today, so I think I'm getting a little old to run around. But I figured when I got out there, I wasn't as smart as all these other people, and I didn't know a lot about being just growing up in construction. But so instead of taking, we were bidding churches and schools and general run of the mill, and I was bidding used car lots.
Oh.
So, and I got a kind of a feeling for small construction, and so one day the GSA, General Service Administration, in the early 70s, came out with a type of construction that had never been done in this acquisition. that had never been done in the United States, and it was called an IQ contract.
An IQ?
IQ, indefinite quantity. And nobody knew what it was, but what it is amounted to is taking a manual of unit prices and then if you bid on the job, you put a modifier on it, and they had priced those individual items for.
So it's a type of contract rather than
It's a
construction?
Type of contract.
Type of contract, I understand.
And so, they put it out for the whole region, which covers, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and the state of Texas. And there's about 7 or 8 of these packages that came out at one time. And nobody knew what they were, and I certainly didn't know what they were.
So you were challenged by the opportunity
Yeah,
to
so-
participate?
Well, I bid all 7 or 8. Not knowing anything about anything. So, I got all of them, because nobody else did.
Nobody else knew any more than you did. I didn't know anything, and nobody knew as much as I did.
Well, I evidently thought they knew more than I did, because I ended up with them. And so as a result, we started out and worked them, and we're still working under that contract.
Under that contract. That is an ongoing contract, isn't it?
And that's what made it different, because you got the contract, and then it was.
And it just was a continuous process.
A continuous process for 5, 10, 15, and the contract evolved into ever service, all the military started using these contracts, and the Army, the Navy, the Space.
Interesting. How did you get here, Sue? How did you get to Austin?
I went to Texas.
So you
From where?
returned to Austin.
It took us 40 years to get back.
She wasn't familiar with I-35.
Well, his business was in Fort Worth, and then we opened a company in Houston. We lived in Houston for a while, and then we had an opportunity to open another office in Austin, and Jerry said, I don't need to stay in Fort Worth, I'll move to Austin and run that business from there. So he's still running it from here, and the home office is in Fort Worth.
So
And
you're
you
not
also have a
retired?
home on Lake Travis, don't you? Or
No,
Lake-
we just sold our house. Somebody came and knocked on the door and offered us full price if we'd sell it and move out in less than 4 weeks, and we said, okay, because we already had this place.
How about it? Yeah. All right, well, I
Very
think
good.
that's, our
Thank you
group.
very much.
You're welcome.